We all try to do it. We try to juggle emails while we're in a meeting while also trying to figure out what's for dinner. But why does it always feel like we're, dropping the ball? Today, we're going to get to the bottom of why you can't really multitask. And the secret? It's all hidden inside a really cool model of how our brains work.
I mean, think about it for a second. That exact moment you switch from, say, writing a really important report to just answering a quick text message. There's that mental stutter, right? That little hiccup where you feel kind of lost for a second. It just feels clunky. Well, that isn't just a feeling. It turns out it's a fundamental part of how your brain is wired.
And that jarring, clunky feeling, it actually has a name. It's called the switching cost. It's this tiny but absolutely crucial penalty your brain has to pay every single time it changes gears. And if you can understand this cost, you can understand the real limits of your own focus.
So, to really get why this cost even exists, we have to pop the hood and take a look at how our brain manages its workload. Because it's not just one big computer doing everything at once. Oh no, it's a much more complex, coordinated system. Let's dive into your brain's internal juggling act.
The scientific framework we're going to use to understand this is called the WMDEC model. It stands for Working Memory with Distributed Executive Control. That's a mouthful, I know. But the big idea is that our working memory isn't just one single thing. It's a whole system of different parts that all have to work together.
So, to make this way easier to wrap our heads around, let's use a metaphor. I want you to imagine that your working memory is like a top-notch project management team working inside your head. Every member of this team has a very specific job, and for anything to get done, they all have to communicate and coordinate perfectly.
And every great team needs a leader, right? A boss, someone calling the shots. And your mental project team is absolutely no different. This leader is the most critical part of the entire operation.
In the WMDEC model, this leader is called the executive memory. This is the component that's in charge of all the high-level command and control. You can think of it quite literally as the CEO of your cognitive workspace.
And check out the CEO's job description. It's fascinating. It doesn't just hold on to information. It's actively managing the whole process. It sets the main goal, remember this list. It figures out the game plan, and, most importantly, it decides which other member of the team gets to be in charge of any specific part of the task.
Okay, so if the executive memory is our CEO, who else is on the payroll? Let's meet the rest of the crew and see how this whole mental project team really comes together.
So here's the whole lineup. You've got your CEO, the executive memory, setting the plan. Then you have the shared whiteboard, or the episodic buffer, which is where all the current important stuff is held for everyone to see. Then you've got the specialists, like a verbal expert for sounds and words, and a visual expert for images and spaces. And finally, you have the archives. That's your long-term memory, providing all the background knowledge the team needs to make sense of anything.
Now, this is a really important distinction. The CEO isn't down in the weeds doing all the moment-to-moment work. It decides what needs to be done, while the whiteboard holds the active information, the stuff that's actually being worked on right now. It's the difference between the strategy and the execution board.
And this slide is a perfect way to think about your different memory systems. The specialists, they're basically the sticky notes you've got plastered all over your monitor, temporary, low-effort reminders for the job right in front of you. But the archives, that's the entire company library, the huge, permanent database of everything you've ever learned. All right, so we've met the team. Let's put them to work. Let's actually see how they all work together on a real cognitive task.
So here's a classic test right out of cognitive psychology. Your goal is super simple. Remember this string of letters and do it in order. Seems easy enough, doesn't it? But behind the scenes, your entire mental project team is scrambling into action.
So first things first, the CEO sets the mission. Recall these letters. And right away, it starts delegating. The verbal specialist kicks in and starts rehearsing them over and over. That's that little voice in your head saying W, T, Z. As that sequence is getting built, it's held on the shared whiteboard. And all the while, the archives are kicking in the basic info, like what a W or a T even looks and sounds like. It's this beautiful coordinated dance.
And now we get to the absolute heart of it. If this team is so well coordinated when it's focused on one thing, what on earth happens when we suddenly ask them to do something else entirely? Well, this is where the cost comes in. Now, here's where the WMDEC model really stands out from other theories. A lot of models basically assume that shifting your attention is super fast, maybe even free.
But the WMDEC model says, no way. It argues that what's happening isn't just a simple shift of focus. It's a formal, deliberate transfer of control.
And this quote from Andre van Dierdendock just nails it. The time cost exists because you have to change the dominance relation. So what does that mean in our little project team metaphor? It means the CEO has to officially demote the first task from being the most important thing and formally promote the second task to take its place. It's a whole procedure. It's not just flipping a switch.
Think of it this way. When you switch tasks, you're not just telling your team, hey, everybody look over here now. Not at all. You are forcing the CEO to halt the entire project, write up a new project brief, reassign all the roles, and formally launch a completely different initiative. That's a process, and that process takes time. That is the switching cost. So what's the big takeaway for you in all this? Well, that mental friction you feel when you're multitasking. It's not just in your imagination. It's a real, measurable biological cost of your brain reconfiguring its entire operational plan. Every single switch, no matter how tiny, requires this whole reconfiguration. And when you do that over and over and over again, those costs just pile up, leading to mistakes, slower performance, and that feeling of being completely wiped out.
And that leaves us with one final, really powerful question to think about. Knowing now that every single switch forces your mental CEO into this costly handover process, how could you redesign your day? How could you structure your work to minimize those transitions? How can you set things up so your project team could actually see one job through to the end before having to start the next? The answer to that? Well, it could change everything about how you get things done.